Hi, I'm Daniel, and welcome to a special episode of HNN. The RoboBees have decided to transition from LabVIEW to Java. We've decided to interview the CNC subteam to find out more about it. Here's Brian and his interview with them.
Tell us a little bit about LabVIEW.
So LabVIEW is a language that was produced and maintained by National Instruments. It is a graphical-based language as opposed to most languages that people are used to. You take blocks that are intended to do functions and put them into a picture and connect wires between them to represent the flow of data between various components. It is also interesting and different from most languages in that it's not an object-oriented language or things like that. It is what's known as a data flow paradigm language. So instead of creating objects to represent things and store data like that, you have data just by itself and it flows through your program. So if you have like a series of sensors that you want to read from and do processing on, you take the data from the sensor and modify the data as opposed to storing it in some form of object.
What were some of the limitations that you found with LabVIEW?
Okay, so LabVIEW isn't really like most other programming languages. You know, it's kind of designed for engineers and scientists who don't really want to get into the kind of technical programming level aspect of it. So instead of being written in text, it uses a system of boxes and wires as a sort of abstraction for the kind of testing equipment you would find in a laboratory. So while it makes it accessible for those types of people, it limits what we can do on the technical side of things, and also because it's proprietary, it's owned by National Instruments, and it's not open source. Very few people develop tools that work LabVIEW, so most of the stuff that we want to do, we have to develop on our own, which takes up time and limits us from improving other aspects of the robot while we're programming.
What do you hope to accomplish with Java that you couldn't do with LabVIEW? So, what are some of the major advantages of that language?
Okay, so the first, I think, is ease and making everything compact, right? So in Java, in LabVIEW, each thing had to be its own VI, and it could be quite time-consuming to make sure everything was interlinking, because you had to physically connect one box to another using a wire. Whereas Java, you can do all that a lot faster, a lot more efficiently without having to waste a lot of time.
Have you found any problems or challenges with Java yet?
How hard it is to find the bugs, because there have been multiple instances where I've had an issue, understood roughly what the issue is, went to the part of the code where it should be, and simply glazed right over the actual problem, even if I looked over that section multiple times. It's happened 4 times, and I'd like to admit that it's only on the 5th attempt I'm like, oh, that was painfully simple.
Was there something that ultimately made the team make the decision to switch over to Java?
It was a few things. One of the big things is that for the past few years, most of our knowledge base for the mentors that would be teaching and heading up the programming subteam were Java or C++ based. There was very little knowledge base in LabVIEW at that point, and the knowledge base that was there was getting pulled by various life responsibilities, things like that. So in order to find new help, we had to consider switching languages. There also was the fact that the team was starting to look for more advanced abilities in what the robot was capable of and things like that. We had recently just switched to using Git and GitHub for source code management, and it really only works if you are using a text-based language. So there was headache involved with that. There was headache involved with trying to maintain various library functionality year to year. And some of the more advanced things that we were looking to get into was unfeasible, or at least a large amount of work to do in LabVIEW.
So we had more mentors available who knew about the Java language to be able to teach students how to use it. But aside from that, we were also running into, or we found some benefits of Java that we would like to have, like it's better for version control since it's a text-based language. So we're hoping to start making code that can be more reusable year to year, and that we can also have other teams use each year that is much more doable with the text-based language.
So what made you decide specifically on Java as the new language?
So as the FTC programming mentor, Java is very nice because our FTC team actually uses Java already. So students who are coming up through our program and switching from the FTC team will already know the language.
How difficult overall do you think the transition was?
The transition has gone rather smoothly. We started out with a couple of the mentors and a few students just taking what library we had created in LabVIEW over the years and just transitioning over a few things here and there to sort of get a feel for the language as a whole. And then when we felt we were ready, we took one of our older robots, Warhog, the 2016 robot, and we recoded that completely in Java as a way to get experience in the actual WPI interface and how it worked in Java, how it differed from LabVIEW in that respect. And that went pretty well. And then we just slowly started building up our library usage over the years. We started recoding the robot from last year's game. And there have been hiccups here and there, growing pains with using a new language, things like that. But overall, it's been fairly seamless.
It definitely is taking more time than I thought. There's a lot more issues than I expected coming from how functionally different LabVIEW and Java are. But I think it's also going really well. I think the language itself, we actually can set up unit tests for it. So I think we're catching most of our errors that we made long before ever testing them on a robot. So I think it's taking extra time, but because we're following a very structured environment and it's getting us a very good result at the end, that usually works pretty quickly once we get it on a robot.
So I think you touched on this a little bit already, but how will this transition make the process of upcoming FTC students joining FRC smoother?
I think it will make the process smoother in the main way it will do so is the students on FTC are already learning and using Java for the FTC robot and their competition, and transitioning from Java, a written object-oriented language, to LabVIEW, which is a pictorial data flow language, is difficult to wrap your head around, especially if you already have programming experience. It's a almost completely new way to think about problems. So that is a serious shift they would have to do, whereas transitioning from Java to a slightly different way to use Java is, in my mind, much easier.
What is the student's opinion on the change?
Okay, I really like the change just because I worked with Java when I was on FTC, and it's great to use a language that you have some experience in. I also think that that you're far more likely to use Java in the professional world than you are LabVIEW. So giving a language that you can do stuff in a job is really valuable, and it's good to gain skills and experience with that language.
definitely made it easier to work because the GitHub lab that we use has significantly less issues trying to merge text-based code like Java than it did for graphical code like LabVIEW. And just the interface in general that we use, the Visual Studio platform, has a bunch of the tools that we need to bug test our code already in there or easily accessible. So switching to Java has made the workflow more streamlined is the best word I can come up with overall.
What are any immediate future plans for the CNC team is planning on that we can look forward to?
Like I mentioned before, this language makes it very easy to unit test, so we can have all of our code tested before we even have it on a robot. So that during the season can mean that we can get the robot tested and working in a much shorter time, since we'll know it's working before we even have it on the robot itself. And for other future plans, we also are releasing our code in a much more reusable format. So other teams could possibly use our libraries that we're making to implement their own robot code in a shorter time as well.
A big thanks to the CNC mentors and students for giving us their time. That wraps up this episode of HNN. See you next time.